This is my 1994 Dodge Viper RT10, and it is pretty loud. Right now, as far as I understand, it's 3-inch straight pipe, no cats, and glass packs. And even though it's kind of awesome on one hand, on the other it kind of makes it hard to drive this thing for long periods of time. And during the summer, I drive this thing a lot. I'd like to make it a little more drivable. What I think I'm gonna do is add some high flow cats into the exhaust system. First thing is taking the side sill off and seeing what it actually looks like under there, because I have not ever been in there since I've had the car. All right, we're gonna start with the bolts under the hood first. Work smarter, not harder. All right, here's the first cap for the under the door bolts. It was easier than I thought. There we go. All caps are out. Now we'll take the bolts out. Gotta use some automotive tweezers here to get the bolt out. Last one's gonna be harder because it's under the lip of the door, so I think I need an angle driver. All right, after much struggling, we finally got this one going. I don't even understand how someone got this bolt in, the screw in, based on the angle that it's at. All right, finally got it out. That was a pain, but they're all out. All right, there's one out. All right, second one out, and third one out. All right, put some gloves on. Should have probably done that earlier. Oh boy, here we go. It's coming right off. Wow, sure is a lot of crap in here. All right, so here's the inside of the side sill. Pretty standard from what I've seen in terms of Viper side sills, but still a fair amount of junk in here. Pretty much what I was expecting. I was kind of hoping I could just maybe cut a piece out right there, put a high flow cat in right there, a couple clamps on either end, and sort of call it a day. Alright, so I got myself some high flow cats. I got these from CJ Pony Parts. These are 3-inch universal high flow cats. The pipes on the Viper are supposedly 3 inches. So I'm really hoping that these are gonna work and fit. But yeah, there you go. So high flow cats from CJ Pony Parts. They look nice, they're stainless steel. They look pretty standard high flow from what I've seen in terms of high flow cats. Oh, they're Flowmaster, by the way. The big question is, are they gonna properly fit on my Viper pipe? So I think I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and try cutting this thing right where it is. Okay, that actually freaking worked. All right, that guy's out. All right, I just put the exhaust over on the workbench. Now I'm going to do a test fit of my Flowmaster high flow cat. Oh my god, I actually think it, oh my god, it fits. It freaking fits. I was afraid it was not going to fit. All right, I'm going to clean up these edges because the cutting did make the edges a little rough. So this was all insulation heat shielding in here, but it was like literally toasted. I think now that I'm in here, I'm gonna, take this out. I already took the insulation out. I thought it was like stapled in or something, but no, it's just sort of like folded and held in by pressure. All right, I've been doing some test fitting. I got my high flow cat here, taking some measurements. I've tried to position everything just right so it's got some nice flow and no hard edges in the way of the exhaust. So now I'm trying to figure out how much I need to take off the original pipe to get it to fit back in. All right, I've measured once, twice, a few times, and I think it's time to get this thing cut. Okay, test fitment number 1. Okay, first test fitment seems to be mostly successful. Let me show you guys what's going on. So here you got your exhaust, and then you got your exhaust hangers, then you got your little heat shield here, and then your rubber grommet isolator. It goes like this, so heat shield over the grommet, and then the bolts go through, and then you got these little openings right here on the side, and you got these holes for the hangers. But these are straight through holes like this, and the hangers are like diagonal, and so the geometry doesn't really match. And so what's happened is that these hangers got jammed in here diagonally, so basically the torque has torn this end off, and the same thing is slowly happening on the bottom. So everything's just fighting itself and sort of tearing itself apart. So when I took things apart, this little heat shield was mangled. I had to shape it back into proper shape, so to speak. At this point, I'm thinking I will cut off the old hangers and make some new hangers. This is always the way it goes with any project. You pull the thread and you start finding other issues you gotta address. Or you don't have to address them, but they'll probably cause you problems later. I'm trying to do this the right way and leave things better than how I found them. Nice. It's time to try to get these old hangers off. There's quite a number of burrs where I cut it, so I'm going to try to grind those down a bit. That's better. Alright, so this mount got mangled, so I'm going to try to do a little bit of surgery and see if I can somehow fix it. I'm going to try to put a couple of screws in here and see if I can kind of put it back together, kind of like my collarbone. Well, it's not perfect, but it's better than breaking apart. Yep, I think that's as good as it's gonna get for now. So this is the exhaust hanger heat shield on the driver's side. It was kind of mangled, so I reshaped it, but when I went around to the other side, the passenger side, and looked at the same mount, completely mangled and welded into and onto and just torn apart and chewed to pieces, so it's pretty much non-existent and useless. So I'm gonna see if I can recreate this, because otherwise I don't have one. Alright, don't know if you can see it, but I got some lines scraped into the metal. So let's go see if we can cut this thing and shape it. Not too bad so far. Now I gotta cut these little tabs out. Not too bad. Not too bad, all things considered. Here's the old, and here's the new. Pretty darn close, I will say. As of now, I'm not able to recreate these dimples, so I'm just going to have to go without those for now. All things considered, I'm pretty happy. I think it's going to do the job just fine. It's not a precision piece. This will be going on the passenger side. This will stay where it was on the driver's side, and we'll keep going. So I got the exhaust pipes reinstalled and placed and positioned and spaced and all that good stuff. But I've got my reshaped heat shield there. I've got the repaired isolator grommet behind there. I got my new mount there on the back of the exhaust pipe. I've got my first clamp here, the new high flow cat. Second clamp onto the original stock pipe. Actually, that's not the stock pipe. That's aftermarket, and then right there is stock. I've got the whole arrangement in place, and all of that is much better than what it was. I'm hoping this makes all the difference I am hoping it's going to make in terms of not blowing my eardrums out and having that horrible drone. Only problem I'm running into at this point now is kind of what I was afraid was going to happen. With such a long piece of steel here, no longer being one solid piece, now there's a break right here. It's slouching a little bit right here, no matter how tight I make this bracket or this coupler or whatever. It's slouching, sinking a little bit under its own weight, because this is quite heavy. So as much as I hate to say it, I think I'm gonna need to fabricate an extra mount here somewhere to give it another point of support. This is a whole lot more work than I was planning on, so that's the fun of car stuff. This is always the way it goes with any project. You pull the thread and you start finding other issues you gotta address. All right, here's what I've done. I've made another little exhaust hanger hook. That's the first one I made, and so now we've got a second one. Let's see if I can weld this into place and see if it lines up with where it needs to be on the Viper. Alright, I'm going to do the other side of the rod here just to give it a good full weld on both sides. Pretty good, all things considered, but then the other side, which was the first side I did, much more ugly. First welds I did on this guy over here were much better. They're still not great, but they're better and cleaner and somewhat more consistent. It's tricky trying to do a circular piece to a curved surface. Anyways. Got it hung in the sort of the new exhaust hanger that I made, going into the high flow cat. But then there's the new isolator and the new hook right there. So I'm thinking I can just probably weld a piece of bar right there and bump it out a little bit and then go into this isolator and help this middle section hang on its own instead of just sort of sagging in the middle. Gonna bend it here, here, and here, I think. I'm getting myself confused. Let me just do it. Okay, here we are on what I think is the finished product on the driver's side of the Viper. So kind of hard to see, but that mount there with that isolator there, and then that mount there. Now it's time for the passenger side. Lots of gross insulation. Oh my god. Take a look at this hack job. It's completely different than the other side. Okay. Ooh. That is finally out. Look how mangled this thing is. So I made a new one. We've got one exhaust isolator. We've got one new exhaust isolator heat shield that I recreated. I'm trying to do this in the right order. And then I got some washers because I couldn't recreate the stamp indentation. Those go on the inside. And that goes there. Washers go like that, or the bolt goes like that. Washer goes like that. Everything's fitting nicely. Thank God. That's dimpled towards the bolts. All right, and that's how it's supposed to look. Cool. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy with that. So one of the other things I've noticed about this exhaust system setup is that this exhaust hanger is a couple inches longer than its match on the other side, so they're not really matches at all. They welded this end onto this, and I think the reason they did this is because they welded that end to the friggin' bracket that was destroyed, or the heat shield that was destroyed that I showed you. So I'm gonna chop an inch off, and that's gonna get me the same length that's on the other side, and then I'll be able to make all my measurements consistently. All right, and that's done. 3 1/4. All right, about 3 1/4 on the other side. So these are pretty close to each other. Okay, that's pretty good. Alright, so now we gotta start sizing up the front, figuring out where we need to cut this. Over here like that. Okay, does that line up? Yeah, I think that lines up pretty good. Ouch, ankle hurts. Getting ready to cut. I just made the new midsection hanger, so we're gonna cut it and then start placing it to weld. Pretty good. That goes on the exhaust pipe. Now I need to make a hanger for the inside of the exhaust tunnel. Okay, I think that's good enough. All right, we've made progress. Exhaust pipes are in, adjusted, positioned, tweaked, clamps, catalytic converter, the mounts that I had to weld in place, the new ones, you can see it a little bit there. Repainted the tips. So this is the passenger side, the driver's side is also done. I already moved the Viper, it sounds good. Still sounds loud and mean, but I think some of that drone is gone, or mostly gone, or at least enough gone where it doesn't blow your eardrums out. So here's the driver's side, same thing. I had to do a lot of measuring, remeasuring, double, triple, and quadruple checking. A lot of work to bend the mounts into the right position in order for the exhaust tip to hang in the right place. One problem I did have is when I did my first couple startups, I was leaking. And so I tightened these a lot more according to spec. I was hoping I didn't have to tighten them that much, but I ended up having to tighten them almost that much. Apparently these clamps have anywhere of a suggested range of 40 to 60 foot-pounds of torque. I started at the lower end because I didn't want to over torque them. And I torqued them up and tightened them up real tight. And they so far seem to not be leaking, so fingers crossed. Because let me tell you, this was a lot of work. Oh, the other thing that happened was that, let's see if I can get my finger in here. Where's my finger? So that right there is the hanger I made, welded it to the back of the exhaust pipe here. That was chattering against this little heat shield here, so I had to open up that little hanging opening more so that they wouldn't touch each other. So, you know, just a lot of taking a couple steps forward, taking a step or two back, a few more steps forward, and another step or two back, and just kind of doing that again and again and again and again and again. So as far as I can tell, the exhaust side of things is done, which is really freaking awesome and really exciting. So now it's time to move on to the next part of the project, which are the exhaust covers. These were basically sort of lined with a heat shield insulation. It was absolutely just gross and ugly and disgusting and falling apart and burnt and disintegrating, and it was just messy. The rivets, a lot of the rivets had failed basically, so it was just sort of like sitting in here and bouncing around. So I ripped it all out, and then lo and behold, I found that the inside of the sill has been corroding. This is always the way it goes with any project. You pull the thread and you start finding other issues you got to address. So I'm glad I ripped it all out, because now I see that that was ultimately damaging the inside of my exhaust covers. So I'm going to basically refinish the insides. I'm going to basically grind down all this corrosion and then paint the entire inside with a high temperature paint. I'm not refinishing the outside. I think I'm going to do that next winter. I just don't feel good about putting it back in the state. So yeah, that's the next step. Grind all this corrosion down and then repaint it. Ooh. Ah. All right, so they're both done. Next step is getting these stock heat shields back into place in here. And to do that, I've got to redo these rivets. All right, we're gonna start small. Okay. All right. There we go. That looks good. Okay, I think we're done for the rivets. All things considered, this is pretty good. All right, we got new parts. Here you go, you got heat shield, and you got little clamps, and you got these little mounting brackets here. So you put this over the exhaust, but with this bracket on the hose clamp, like that, then you've got yourself a nice little shield that kicks out from the exhaust that you're clamping it onto. So there's no contact, it just kind of hovers. I think these are awesome. So yeah, I'm excited. So let's see about getting these together. Okay. So now I've only got to do that 3 more times. Alright, so here's my dilemma. This end is hitting my exhaust hanger here, and the other end is just barely hitting my exhaust hanger here. So even though these cost me a pretty penny, I think what I basically just have to do is take my tin snips and just trim off the ends a little bit. But just doing a mock fit, other than the length, I think it works pretty good. I'm bummed that I have to cut these because these are so nice. If you want to make an omelet, you gotta break some eggs. Let's go trim this, and then we'll go from there. Just squeezing the ends down a little bit just to hopefully keep them together. Take number 2. I ended up not cutting both ends because, again, I just really feel bad about cutting into these things, so I'd like to maintain as much of the original edging as I possibly can. So I cut a little bit more off of this end. Let's see how it does. It looks like it clears. All right, there's about 1 narrow finger's width between this end and this end in terms of the heat shield and the hanger. Because of the glass pack, because this is wider, it's kicking the shield up and out a little bit. I think I have to make a few adjustments, but we're so close. We're so close. So now for my next dilemma, which is the forward section of the exhaust. Yeah, I would just love for this to be able to fit in here nice and neat, like a little cute puzzle piece, but I just don't think that's gonna happen. There's too many obstructions. We've got the exhaust hanger hooks and the isolator there. We've got another wider part of the exhaust here being the high flow cat. These brackets, and we got this curve here. No pretty way to do this. Here I go cutting again. All right, let me show you what I've been doing. So I've cut little spaces for the exhaust clamps. I need to add some spacers to this section here. And of course, as my luck would have it, this bracket is fine, but this bracket is right where this exhaust clamp is. So I'm gonna put a couple new eyelets here and here. So I'm gonna start with that. All right, there we go. I made that. Ah, what a lovely sound. Last one is on. 90, all right, I'm gonna put my spacers, whatever you wanna call these, along with the bolts, and then feed my strap through. It's a noisy job, but someone's got to do it. There we go. I think we're ready to go put it on. Okay, let's see. So noisy. By God, I think this side is done. All right, let's get cracking on the other side, or cutting, to be more accurate. You can hardly tell the difference between the factory ones and the ones I put in, so whether that means I'm kind of good or the factories are just kind of meh, either way I'm happy. Alright, it's pretty much a mirror image of the passenger side. This did not really go according to plan, but now I can't see it from over here, maybe, can I? See it a little bit. Exhaust cover time. This edge is just very, very mangled. I've never really seen how mangled these were until I was doing this project. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of material off of this, just kind of clean these up in general. Okay, so I can't remember if I showed you guys or not, but this and these and all of this stuff here, it's all the hardware that came off of the exhaust cover side panels. And it's kind of like a mishmash of just random screws and rusty washers. Some are missing, others are different. I want to leave it better than I found it. So what I've done is I went out and got some new self-drilling screws, because that's what some of these are. And then I got some fender washers to help sandwich these screws into the frame and existing holes, and hopefully just clean this whole thing up. Let's start by getting one of these exhaust covers into place, and we will start trying the new hardware and see how it goes. Alright, that looks pretty good. On to the next 12, or however many there actually are. Well, some good news, some bad news here. It's kind of a mixed bag. So I got the side sill on, and even though the side sill itself fits on pretty good, it's still a pretty close margin of clearance there, which really bugs me. So somewhere in my calculations, I miscalculated. So I'm afraid that the other side's gonna be very close as well. Let's try it and we'll see what happens. This is always the way it goes with any project. You pull the thread and you start finding other issues you gotta address. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, despite double, triple, and quadruple checking my work, despite doing trigonometry and calculus and all other sorts of forms of math, I still managed to screw up the geometry of this exhaust pipe. Needless to say, it's very frustrating to do this much work, fix so many issues, improve so many different things, and then still in the end have something that basically stops you from crossing the finish line. It's gonna take me a little bit to kind of get over the fact that this project isn't done and everyone's gonna kind of be seeing up its side skirt, so to speak. But hey, we've gotten this far and it's so much better than what it was. So stay tuned for part 2 of this project. I think that's gonna do it for this video. Stay tuned for part 2 at some point. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one.